Hidden beneath the dust of centuries, there are places where nature and human ambition once intertwined in breathtaking harmony, gardens so magnificent they became legends. But these were no ordinary landscapes. They were epicenters of power, sanctuaries of the divine, and secret laboratories of ancient innovation. Today, we're uncovering 25 lost gardens of the ancient world, each with its own untold story. From vanished paradises that kings fought wars over, to sacred groves where whispers of the gods still linger in the soil, these gardens held secrets far beyond their beauty. Why were they built? What made them disappear? And what clues have they left behind? The answers might just reshape how you see history itself. This is a journey into the Earth's forgotten wonders, where every leaf, every stone has a tale to tell. Of all the lost gardens of the ancient world, none captivate the imagination quite like the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, described by ancient writers as a cascade of lush terraces soaring above the desert. This wonder supposedly bloomed in the heart of Mesopotamia, but did it ever truly exist? The mystery begins with its location. Some historians insist the gardens were built by King Nebuchadnezzar II to please his homesick queen, while others argue they may have been in Nineveh, crafted by an entirely different ruler centuries earlier. Even more intriguing, there are no first-hand Babylonian records of them at all. What makes this garden such a puzzle isn't just its uncertain origins, it's the sheer impossibility of its design. Picture a towering man-made mountain dripping with vines and exotic trees, requiring an irrigation system powerful enough to defy the arid climate. Ancient texts describe hidden screws lifting water from the Euphrates, channeling it upward through a labyrinth of pipes. Yet no physical trace of this engineering marvel has ever been found. Could it have been an elaborate myth, a story told to exaggerate Babylon's grandeur? Or was it real, a political statement in stone and soil, meant to prove the king's dominance over nature itself? The garden's legend may be tangled in propaganda, but one thing is certain: their ghost lingers for a reason. Whether fact or fantasy, they reveal an ancient obsession turning the impossible into reality, no matter the cost. The debate over the Hanging Gardens isn't just about missing ruins, it's a clash between words and stone. Ancient Greek and Roman writers, from Strabo to Diodorus Siculus, painted vivid pictures of terraced marvels dripping with greenery, yet not a single Babylonian tablet or inscription from the era mentions them. Could these accounts have been travelers' tall tales, or worse, political propaganda meant to glorify Babylon's rivals? Modern archaeology adds fuel to the fire. Excavations in Babylon uncovered massive walls and the foundations of Nebuchadnezzar's palace, but no trace of the legendary gardens. Some scholars argue that if they existed at all, they might have been confused with another wonder: the royal gardens of Nineveh, where Assyrian King Sennacherib left behind detailed inscriptions boasting of his engineering feats, including water screws and aqueducts feeding terraced plants. Yet the human urge to believe in the impossible keeps the legend alive. Digital reconstructions today imagine the gardens as a vertical Eden, with palm trees swaying over shaded walkways and waterfalls cascading down brick tiers. Whether real or myth, these visions tell us something profound. Across millennia, the idea of a garden-defying nature has been irresistible. It's not just about plants and stone, it's about the audacity to create paradise where none should exist. While Babylon's hanging terraces teased human ambition, Egypt's sacred groves of Heliopolis whispered of the divine. Here, towering sycamores and date palms didn't just grow, they served as living temples to Ra, the sun god. This wasn't merely a garden, it was a cosmic map where every tree, pond, and pathway mirrored the heavens. Priests tended these groves with meticulous care, cultivating exotic plants like the Persea and blue lotus, believed to hold fragments of Ra's power. The gardens weren't just beautiful, they were sacred laboratories, Rituals unfolded beneath their canopies, with priests tracking the sun's movement through carefully aligned clearings, turning botany into astronomy. Some scholars argue the groves even functioned as early calendars, their shadows marking solstices and equinoxes with uncanny precision. Yet what truly set Heliopolis apart was its duality. By day, the groves pulsed with chants and offerings. By night, they transformed into silent observatories. The famous Bennu bird, symbol of rebirth, was said to nest here, tying the cycles of nature to the afterlife. No walls separated the earthly from the eternal. Even the garden's water channels were designed as reflections of the Nile's celestial counterpart, the Milky Way. Today, almost nothing remains above ground, but fragments of columns and carvings hint at the grandeur that once was. Unlike Babylon's disputed wonder, Heliopolis leaves no doubt this was a place where faith took root, literally. The sacred groves didn't just honor the gods, they proved that in ancient Egypt heaven and earth grew side by side. Far from the mystery of Babylon, another ancient ruler was busy shaping nature into a monument to his own power, Assyria's king Sennacherib. His gardens at Nineveh weren't just beautiful, they were a calculated display of imperial might. Unlike the debated hanging gardens, Sennacherib left behind something even more valuable, his own words. Inscriptions boast of mile-long aqueducts carved through mountains, canals that redirected entire rivers, and terraces heavy with rare trees hauled from conquered lands. This wasn't gardening, it was geopolitical theater. Sennacherib didn't just import plants, he uprooted entire species from distant regions like the Levant and Persia, forcing foreign flora to thrive under Assyrian rule as a living metaphor for his empire's reach. One inscription even details a mechanical marvel, a water-raising screw made of bronze pulling the Tigris uphill to feed the gardens. Archaeologists later found remnants of his system, including stone channels so precisely engineered they still direct water today. But the real genius of Nineveh's gardens lay in their symbolism. Every element served dual purposes: shade-giving palms cooled royal courtyards while also flaunting control over trade routes, and aromatic herbs masked the city's smells while proving access to luxury. Even the layout was strategic, terraces visible to emissaries from the palace walls, silently reinforcing Assyria's dominance. Unlike Babylon's lost wonder, Nineveh's gardens didn't just defy nature, they weaponized it, turning beauty into a tool of conquest. Today, the site lies mostly buried near modern Mosul, but scattered carvings and clay tablets preserve Sennacherib's pride. "I made vines and fruit trees flourish," he declares, as if the land itself bowed to him. It's a reminder that in the ancient world, gardens weren't escapes from power, they were its purest expression. Tucked away from the bustling streets of ancient Athens, there was a garden where the greatest currency wasn't gold, but ideas. The philosopher's garden of Epicurus wasn't just a tranquil retreat, it was a radical experiment in how humans ought to live. Unlike the royal gardens of Babylon or Nineveh, this space rejected grandeur in favor of simplicity, its paths trodden by thinkers debating everything from ethics to the nature of the universe. Epicurus designed his garden as a sanctuary from the chaos of public life. Walled off from Athenian politics, it became a haven for those seeking truth, open even to women and enslaved people, unheard of in a society obsessed with status. Fruit trees and medicinal herbs lined its walkways, but these plants served a deeper purpose. Lavender and sage weren't just fragrant, they were grown for their calming properties, aiding the garden's central mission, achieving ataraxia or freedom from distress. The real magic, though, lay in the conversations. Followers of Epicurus gathered under the shade of olive trees, dissecting questions like, "What is happiness?" and "How do we conquer fear?" Their answers would ripple through history, shaping everything from Renaissance humanism to modern psychology, the garden's most revolutionary idea. That pleasure, not wealth or power, was life's highest goal, but but only when defined as tranquility, not indulgence. Today, the physical garden is long gone, its exact location debated. Yet its legacy thrives. The word Epicurean still evokes refined taste, but the true lesson of this humble plot was far more profound. In a world chasing excess, Epicurus proved that sometimes the richest soil grows the simplest wisdom. In the world of ancient myths, few gardens shimmer with as much symbolic perfection as the legendary Garden of Alcinous, immortalized in Homer's Odyssey. While kings built gardens to flaunt power, this one existed primarily in verse, a poetic masterpiece crafted to embody the ideal harmony between humanity and nature. When Odysseus, shipwrecked and exhausted, stumbles upon it, the garden isn't just a refuge, it's a living dream. Homer paints a scene so vivid it feels tangible. Pear trees bending under golden fruit, vines heavy with grapes climbing silver trellises, and fountains murmuring beside beds of eternal bloom. But here's the twist: every detail is layered with meaning. The garden's perpetual harvest symbolizes unending prosperity. Its orderly rows reflect cosmic balance, and even its irrigation, fed by twin springs, mirrors the ancient Greek belief in duality, like life and death, or mortal and divine. For centuries, scholars have debated whether this paradise was pure fiction or inspired by real places. Some point to Corfu, where excavations uncovered remnants of an ancient orchard near a palace matching Homer's descriptions. Others argue for Sicily, where terraced gardens dating back to the Bronze Age align eerily with the poet's words. Archaeologists have even found traces of advanced irrigation systems in both locations. Could these have sparked the legend? Yet perhaps the garden's true power lies beyond geography. Homer's description isn't just a setting, it's a mirror. For weary Odysseus, it represents a fleeting taste of peace before his journey home. For listeners of the epic, it was an aspirational blueprint, a world where nature and culture exist in flawless unity. Unlike Babylon's engineered wonder or Assyria's political statement, Alcinous's garden asks a quieter question: what if paradise wasn't about domination but belonging? Today, whether buried under Sicilian soil or blooming only in imagination, this lost garden endures as a testament to humanity's oldest longing to find a place where the earth itself welcomes you home. While epic myths and political statements shaped other gardens, Persia's Pasargadae took a different path, one that blended earthly beauty with heavenly symmetry. Built by Cyrus the Great in the 6th century before the Common Era, these terraced gardens weren't just a royal retreat, they became the blueprint for paradise itself. At the heart of Pasargadae's design was the charbog, a revolutionary quadripartite layout dividing the garden into 4 precise sections, a reflection of the Zoroastrian vision of the cosmos. Water channels crisscrossed the space like sacred geometry, fed by an advanced network of underground aqueducts called qanats. But this wasn't just about aesthetics. The channels symbolized the 4 rivers of life, merging practicality with spirituality. Shade-giving cypress trees lined the paths, while pomegranates and roses, later Persia's floral emblem, burst with color, their fragrances carried on the breeze. What set Pasargadae apart was its intentional harmony. Unlike Assyria's displays of dominance or Babylon's disputed grandeur, Cyrus's garden embodied paradisa, the Persian concept of a walled sanctuary where nature and civilization coexisted in perfect balance. This idea would echo through history, inspiring Islamic gardens from Andalusia to Mughal India. The Alhambra's courtyards and the Taj Mahal's reflective pools owe their DNA to Cyrus's vision. Archaeologists have unearthed remnants of the garden's stone channels and plantings, confirming ancient accounts, but perhaps its most enduring legacy is philosophical. In a world where kings often built to intimidate, Pasargadae whispered a radical idea: that true power lies not in conquering nature but in collaborating with it. 2.5 millennia later, that lesson still grows fresh. Long before modern hydroponics, the Aztecs mastered the art of farming on water. The floating gardens of Xochimilco weren't just a feat of engineering, they were a lifeline, transforming a marshy lake into a thriving agricultural empire. Picture this, a vast network of rectangular islands, anchored to the lakebed yet bobbing gently on the surface, each one bursting with crops from maize to vibrant flowers. These weren't natural landforms, they were Chinampas' carefully crafted plots built layer by layer from mud, reeds, and willow trees, a testament to human ingenuity meeting nature's challenges. What made these gardens revolutionary wasn't just their construction, it was their efficiency. Farmers dredged nutrient-rich silt from the lake bottom to pile onto woven reed mats, creating fertile soil that yielded up to 7 harvests a year. Willows planted along the edges acted as natural anchors, their roots knitting together to form living barriers against erosion. Canals between the plots served dual purposes, highways for canoes and arteries for irrigation, keeping the gardens perpetually hydrated. The system was so effective that at its peak, Xochimilco fed over 200,000 people in the bustling heart of Tenochtitlan. But the true marvel lies in what survives today. While much of the lake has vanished, over 8,000 Chinampas still flourish in Mexico City's Xochimilco district, their bright flowers and vegetables a living legacy of Aztec innovation. Locals tend them much as their ancestors did, using traditional methods passed down generations. Biodiversity thrives here too. These floating plots have become accidental sanctuaries for endangered species like the axolotl, a quirky salamander that evolved alongside the gardens. Modern researchers are now studying Chinampas for solutions to urban farming and water conservation. The Aztecs didn't just grow food, they engineered an ecosystem, proving that sometimes the most enduring gardens aren't those that conquer nature, but those that float effortlessly within it. East of Persia's geometric perfection, China's imperial gardens of the Han Dynasty took harmony to staggering new heights, not with rigid symmetry, but with a deliberate embrace of controlled wildness. These sprawling landscapes weren't just retreats for emperors, they were living canvases where Taoist philosophy met raw political power. Picture mist-draped pavilions perched above serpentine lakes, their reflections broken by the glide of cranes. A scene crafted to mimic the natural world, yet meticulously orchestrated down to every rock and ripple. At the heart of these gardens lay a paradox. While they celebrated Zuran, the Taoist ideal of spontaneity, their creation demanded ruthless precision. Artificial mountains were sculpted from imported boulders to evoke sacred peaks, while diggers reshaped entire valleys to create winding streams that accidentally mirrored the paths of dragons. Exotic animals like peacocks and pandas hauled from conquered territories roamed freely, their presence proof of the emperor's dominion over both man and nature. Yet the garden's true genius was diplomatic. When foreign envoys arrived, they were deliberately led along winding paths designed to disorient, then suddenly confronted with breathtaking vistas meant to humble. A visitor might turn a corner to find a lake dotted with jewel-toned boats, each carrying musicians playing melodies tuned to the season, or stumble upon a grove where rare trees from their homeland grew, a silent reminder that the Han's reach stretched farther than they knew. Archaeologists sifting through ancient records have uncovered inventories listing thousands of plants and animals, alongside diagrams of hydraulic systems rivaling Rome's aqueducts. But perhaps the most telling detail, emperors insisted these gardens appear untouched by human hands, even as teams of laborers toiled nightly to maintain the illusion. The message was clear: true power didn't force nature to obey, it convinced the world the harmony was effortless. In the Han Dynasty's gardens, politics wasn't just practiced in throne rooms, it blossomed silently between lotus pads and drifting clouds. Among all legendary gardens, none carries more weight than the Garden of Eden, a paradise lost yet endlessly sought. But what if Eden wasn't just a myth? What if its vivid imagery, the rivers, the fruit-laden trees, the serpent coiled in the branches, was rooted in real landscapes? Scholars have long traced its origins to the fertile marshlands of ancient Mesopotamia, where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers weave together like the four biblical rivers of Genesis. Imagine the lush wetlands of southern Iraq 5,000 years ago, a maze of waterways teeming with fish, dense reed forests swaying in the wind, and islands thick with date palms. This was the ancestral homeland of the Sumerians, whose creation stories speak of a divine garden called Dilmun, a place of immortality and purity uncannily similar to Eden. Even the geography aligns. Genesis describes Eden's rivers branching into four, just as the Tigris and Euphrates split into smaller channels nourishing the marshlands. The parallels run deeper. Both Eden and Dilmun feature forbidden knowledge, a serpent figure, and a fall from grace, echoes of humanity's fraught relationship with nature. Archaeologists note that Mesopotamian cylinder seals depict sacred trees guarded by deities, flanked by serpent-like creatures. Could these art motifs have seeded Eden's imagery? Yet the most striking clue lies in botany. The Bible mentions Eden's tree of life, a symbol some scholars link to the date palm, the literal tree of life in Mesopotamia, providing food, shade, and materials for survival. Even the word Eden may derive from the Sumerian Eden, meaning fertile plain. Of course, the marshlands today are a shadow of their ancient selves, drained by modern agriculture. But satellite imagery still reveals patches of this primordial landscape, a living whisper of the world that may have inspired humanity's oldest dream of paradise. Whether Eden was real or symbolic, one truth remains: the longing for a perfect garden is written into our bones, a memory as old as rivers themselves. While kings and emperors built gardens to project power, Alexandria's Ptolemaic rulers cultivated something far more enduring: knowledge. Nestled near the legendary Great Library, these gardens weren't just a retreat for scholars. They were the world's first botanical laboratory, where science took root among the petals and leaves. Under the watchful eye of thinkers like Theophrastus, Aristotle's successor, plants here weren't merely admired. They were interrogated, classified, and documented with a precision that would shape botany for centuries. Imagine walking these paths in the 3rd century before the Common Era. Rows of medicinal herbs stretched toward the sun, each labeled in Greek with notes on their properties. Papyrus scrolls piled in nearby benches record observations on pollination, growth cycles, and even early experiments in grafting. Theophrastus didn't just catalogue plants, he asked revolutionary questions. Why do some trees lose their leaves while others stay evergreen? How does soil type affect a plant's scent or potency? His findings filled volumes like Inquiry into Plants, a text so meticulous it remained the botanical Bible for over 1,000 years. What set these gardens apart wasn't just their scholarship, it was their global reach. Ptolemaic rulers, hungry for intellectual supremacy, dispatched explorers to fetch specimens from as far as India and sub-Saharan Africa. Rare spices, exotic flowers, and even mundane grasses were potted, studied, and compared. This was biodiversity as data, a living archive where every leaf held clues to the natural world's patterns. Today, Alexandria's botanical gardens exist only in fragments of text and scattered archaeological clues, but their legacy blossoms every time a scientist traces a plant's lineage or a pharmacist brews a remedy from ancient herbal knowledge. In a world obsessed with conquest, the Ptolemies proved something radical: that a garden could be more valuable than gold if you knew how to read its secrets. High in the cliffs of Jordan's desert, where the sun scorches stone into shades of fire, the ancient Nabateans performed a miracle. They made gardens bloom in the sand. Petra's towering rock facades might steal the spotlight, but hidden within this city's veins lay an even greater marvel: secret oases sustained by an engineering masterpiece. While other cultures flaunted their gardens, the Nabateans concealed theirs, as if nature itself were a treasure to be protected. Carved channels snake through Petra's rose-red canyons, invisible at first glance. These weren't mere aqueducts, they were hydrological symphonies. Engineers designed them to capture every drop of winter rainfall, funneling it through a labyrinth of terracotta pipes and cisterns cut deep into the rock. Some reservoirs held enough water to last 2 years, a lifeline in a land where droughts could stretch for seasons. But the real brilliance lay in the distribution. Gravity did the work, guiding water through precisely angled channels to hidden courtyards where figs, olives, and vines thrived in defiance of the desert. The clues to these gardens aren't just in the stone they're on it. Faded carvings near the treasury depict sacred groves, their trees heavy with fruit, while temple reliefs show deities standing amidst flowing streams. Archaeologists scraping away centuries of dust have uncovered root cavities and pollen traces, proving these weren't just artistic fantasies. One chamber, dubbed the Garden Tomb, even reveals a sunken basin surrounded by niches that once held potted plants, a private sanctuary where the elite could escape the heat under the shade of imported palms. What makes Petra's gardens extraordinary isn't just their survival in the desert, it's their silence. Unlike Babylon's boastful terraces or Nineveh's imperial displays, the Nabateans treated water as sacred, something to be hoarded and worshipped. Their gardens weren't symbols of conquest but of coexistence, a pact between civilization and the earth's harshest rhythms. Today, as drought reshapes modern cities, Petra whispers an ancient lesson. Sometimes the most profound beauty grows where you least expect it, nurtured not by abundance but by ingenuity. While empires rose and fell across the Mediterranean, Carthage cultivated its own green secrets gardens so exclusive, even most citizens never set foot inside them. The Phoenicians didn't just build cities, they engineered ecosystems, turning North Africa's arid coast into a tapestry of perfumed groves and orchards. But these weren't pleasure gardens for the public. Ancient texts whisper of walled sanctuaries reserved for Carthage's elite, spaces so sacred, their destruction became Rome's ultimate act of vengeance. The clues lie in fragments of agricultural manuals, salvaged from the ashes of Carthage's libraries. Phoenician texts detail irrigation techniques so advanced they could coax pomegranates from sand, and citrus groves that bloomed year-round. One manual even describes grafting rare fruit trees onto hardy local roots, a biological hack that let Carthage rulers feast on figs from Lebanon while their enemies starved. But the most tantalizing references are to the Gardens of Tanit, named for the city's mother goddess. Unlike Rome's symmetrical plots, these gardens supposedly twisted in spirals, mirroring the crescent moon symbol of Tanit herself. Archaeologists digging near Carthage's ruined harbors have unearthed traces of these spaces, terracotta pipes lining buried courtyards, and soil samples rich with foreign pollen, evidence of plants imported from as far as Persia and sub-Saharan Africa. Yet the garden's fate is written in fire. When Rome finally crushed Carthage, historians claim legionaries didn't just burn the city, they salted the earth. But recent discoveries hint some gardens may have survived underground, their seeds lying dormant for centuries. What makes these lost gardens so haunting isn't just their beauty, it's what they represented. To Carthage, they were proof of divine favor. To Rome, an arrogance worth erasing. Today, as researchers piece together their layout, one truth emerges. In the ancient world, a garden wasn't just soil and plants. It was power, faith, and identity, all rooted in the same ground. Centuries before the Mughals carved paradise into the hills of Kashmir, another civilization was turning stone and soil into sacred landscapes. In the rugged valleys of ancient Gandhara, modern-day Pakistan, Buddhist monks cultivated gardens that weren't just beautiful but healing. These weren't royal playgrounds or displays of power. They were living extensions of faith where every plant, path, and structure pulsed with spiritual intention. At the heart of these gardens stood the stupa, a dome-shaped shrine cradled by meticulously arranged trees. Pilgrims would walk clockwise along stone-paved paths, tracing the cycle of rebirth as fragrant herbs like tulsi and ashwagandha have brushed their ankles, plants chosen not just for their scent but for their medicinal properties. Monks studied their effects, compiling early texts on herbal remedies that would travel along the Silk Road. Imagine the scene: shaded alcoves where scholars debated philosophy beneath ancient pipal trees, the same species under which Buddha himself attained enlightenment. The genius of Gandhara's gardens lay in their harmony with the land. Unlike the geometric precision of Persian designs, these spaces followed the natural contours of hillsides, their terraces cradling reservoirs that doubled as mirrors for the stupas. Water wasn't just channeled, it was revered, cascading down carved channels to symbolize the flow of wisdom. When archaeologists unearthed the ruins of Taxila's monastic gardens, they found something startling: stone basins lined with bitumen, an ancient waterproofing technique that kept precious water from seeping into the arid soil. But perhaps the most surprising legacy of these gardens is how they quietly shaped the future. Centuries later, Mughal emperors would adopt Gandhara's terrace and water principles in masterpieces like Lahore's Shalimar Bagh. The same reverence for shade-giving trees, the same interplay of reflection and sound. Only now, the Buddhist stupa had become a marble pavilion, and the medicinal herbs had blossomed into roses and jasmine. The thread connecting them, a belief that gardens weren't just places but portals to health, to the divine, or simply to peace. In Gandhara's forgotten soil, the roots of paradise ran deep. In the heart of ancient Rome, where politics and indulgence often intertwined, one general decided to rewrite the rules of luxury, not with gold or marble but with soil and leaves. The haughty Luculini weren't just gardens, they were a revolution in excess, a sprawling testament to what happens when a military genius turns his strategic mind to pleasure. Lucullus, the man who conquered kingdoms in the East, returned home and staged his most daring campaign yet against Roman modesty itself. Imagine terraces dripping with citrus trees, their fruits gleaming like stolen treasure. These weren't just any trees, they were spoils of war, uprooted from Persia and replanted in Rome's soil for the first time. Lucullus's gardeners heated the roots with underground furnaces to fool them into thriving in a colder climate, a scandalous extravagance that left even jaded senators speechless. But the true spectacle lay in the pavilions, where diners reclined on cushions beneath vine-covered pergolas, feasting on delicacies like flamingo tongues while peacocks strutted between tables. Yet beneath the perfumed breeze, darker currents swirled. Critics whispered that Lucullus's gardens were a form of political sabotage, a deliberate provocation to shame Rome's conservative elite. When Cicero accused him of corrupting tradition, Lucullus reportedly smirked and hosted a banquet where live fish were delivered via aqueduct straight to the dining pool. The message was clear: in these gardens, even nature obeyed his whims. Archaeologists sifting through Rome's Palatine Hill have unearthed fragments of this hedonistic paradise: collapsed grottos lined with seashell mosaics, irrigation pipes feeding long-vanished fountains. But perhaps the most telling relic is a single withered citrus seed, carbon-dated to Lucullus's era. It's a tiny, stubborn reminder that Rome's first luxury gardens weren't just about beauty. They were a battle cry in a war between restraint and desire, where every bloom came with a price. Beneath the volcanic ash and ruined palaces of ancient Crete, the Minoans cultivated gardens that blurred the line between sanctuary and spectacle. Unlike the rigid symmetry of Persia or the engineered opulence of Rome, these spaces pulsed with wild energy, twisting paths, riotous colors, and a sense of ceremony woven into every vine. Frescoes preserved for millennia offer tantalizing glimpses: saffron gatherers plucking flowers beneath swaying palms, blue monkeys clambering through fig trees, and everywhere the sacred papyrus, its fronds curling like waves against painted walls. The most striking clues come from Knossos, where archaeologists uncovered a complex of courtyards and terraces arranged in a labyrinthine pattern. But these weren't just aesthetic choices. Some scholars believe the gardens physically mirrored the legendary labyrinth of the Minotaur, their winding walkways symbolizing the hero's journey, alive with danger and revelation. Bull-leaping frescoes found nearby show athletes somersaulting over charging beasts, their bodies arcing above what might have been hedges or low walls. Was this sport performed in the gardens themselves, the vegetation serving as both stage and sacred boundary? Then there's the goddess connection. Shrines tucked between olive trees held serpentine figurines, while fresco fragments depict priestesses dancing amidst blooming lilies. The Minoans didn't just worship nature, they saw divinity in its cycles. Pollen analysis reveals crocuses the source of precious saffron planted in ceremonial patterns, their vibrant stigmas used in rituals and dyes. Even the garden's water features held meaning. Stepped pools lined with seashells suggest purification rites, where the act of descending into water mirrored the descent into the underworld. What emerges isn't just a lost garden, but a living theology. The Minoans didn't separate religion from horticulture, they cultivated both in the same soil. Every blossom was an offering, every wall a canvas for their myths. While later civilizations built gardens to impress or intimidate, Cretes whispered a simpler truth, that paradise isn't a place to conquer, but a dance, one where humans, beasts, and the earth itself move to the same primal rhythm. Rising from the dusty plains of northern Iraq, the short-lived capital of Dur-Sharrukin, built by Assyria's King Sargon II, was a monument to both ambition and anxiety. And at its heart lay gardens designed not just to impress but to intimidate. Unlike the natural harmony of Pasargadae or the intellectual retreats of Athens, these were landscapes of raw domination, where every leaf and petal whispered the same chilling message: resistance is futile. The clues are carved in stone. Assyrian reliefs from the palace walls depict slaves hauling date palms up ramps, their backs bent under the weight of foreign soil. Other panels show prisoners of war, bound and defeated, forced to dig irrigation channels that would nourish trees ripped from the very lands they'd defended. This wasn't just gardening, it was psychological warfare. Sargon's green thumb operated like a military campaign, his botanists cataloging plants like spoils of war. Tribute lists boast of cedars from Lebanon, grapevines from Urartu, even rare medicinal herbs extracted from rebellious cities. Each species was replanted in strict rows, a living map of Assyria's conquests. But the garden's true purpose emerges in their layout. Excavations reveal they surrounded the palace like a living moat, their vibrant colors and perfumes masking the fortress's brutal function. Envoys from rival kingdoms would walk past pomegranates from their own plundered orchards before kneeling before Sargon, a deliberate humiliation. Even the water features served as propaganda. Inscriptions describe a massive canal system diverting rivers to feed the gardens, flaunting Assyria's ability to bend nature itself to its will. What makes Dur-Sharrukin's gardens haunting isn't their beauty, but their brevity. Within a year of Sargon's death, his capital was abandoned, its walls left to crumble. The trees, uprooted from distant homes, withered without their enslaved caretakers. Today, only the reliefs remain, frozen snapshots of a garden built to proclaim eternity, yet doomed to fade as swiftly as the empire it symbolized. In the end, even the mightiest kings can't force roots to grow where they don't belong. Deep in the steamy jungles of Mesoamerica, centuries before the rise of the Maya or the Aztecs, the Olmecs sculpted gardens where spirituality took root in the soil itself. Known as the mother culture of the region, their ritual spaces weren't just about beauty. They were portals to the divine, designed to mirror the very structure of the cosmos. At sites like La Venta, massive earthen mounds rise from the landscape, their slopes once lined with sacred ceiba trees, plants believed to connect the underworld, earth, and heavens with their towering roots and branches. But the true marvel lies beneath the surface. Archaeologists digging here uncovered something startling: sprawling mosaics made from carefully arranged green stones, depicting snarling jaguars and coiling serpents buried just inches below the soil. These weren't decorations, they were offerings, deliberately hidden as if to anchor supernatural energy into the earth. The Olmecs saw gardens as living rituals. Every plant, stone, and pathway held meaning. Ceiba trees, revered as world trees, were planted in precise alignments to mark solstices, while patches of hallucinogenic morning glory vines suggest shamans used these spaces to bridge realms. What's haunting is how these traditions echoed through time. Centuries later, the Maya would adopt the ceiba as their own sacred tree, carving its image into temple walls. Aztec rulers replicated the Olmec's buried serpent mosaics in their own ceremonial precincts, swapping jade for turquoise but keeping the same sinuous shapes. Even the practice of ritual garden burials persisted. Olmec-style offerings of jade axes and figurines have been found beneath the floors of later Mayan plazas. The genius of these gardens wasn't just in their symbolism, but in their sustainability. Pollen analysis reveals the Olmecs cultivated native plants like cacao and rubber trees without disrupting the jungle's balance. Unlike Assyria's conquered landscapes or Rome's engineered fantasies, these spaces worked with nature, blending ceremony and ecology so seamlessly that modern permaculturists still study their techniques. In the Olmec world, a garden wasn't just a place, it was a prayer whispered in leaves and stone, its roots tangled deep with the generations yet to come. Perched high above the Aegean coast, the terraced gardens of Pergamon weren't just a sanctuary, they were an ancient hospital where healing grew from the earth itself. Dedicated to Asclepius, the god of medicine, these Hellenistic marvels combined science and spirituality in ways that would shape healthcare for centuries. Picture this: patients arriving after long journeys, their ailments recorded on stone tablets before they ascended through tiered gardens fragrant with sage, myrtle, and valerian, each plant chosen for its curative powers. The real magic happened after sunset. Visitors would sleep in sacred enclosures called a baton, where priests interpreted their dreams as divine diagnoses. But this wasn't mere superstition. Recent excavations uncovered surgical tools and herb grinding equipment alongside votive offerings, proving Pergamon's gardens were as much about practical medicine as mystical ritual. The terraces themselves functioned like a giant apothecary. Upper levels grew stimulants like mint and thyme, while lower, shaded beds cultivated sedatives such as poppy and mandrake, a living pharmacy organized by potency. Rome would later borrow this model wholesale, transforming Pergamon's healing principles into the lavish baths of Baiae and Capri. Even the marble Asclepia of the Roman Empire traced their blueprints back to these grassy terraces. But what set Pergamon apart was its holistic vision. Water channels didn't just irrigate plants, they fed therapeutic fountains where patients bathed, their mineral-rich flows still detectable in the soil today. Shaded colonnades provided quiet for meditation, while the panoramic views over the sea were prescribed as balm for the mind. Archaeologists analyzing pollen samples have identified over 60 medicinal species cultivated here, some imported from as far as Egypt and India. Yet the most enduring legacy might be the philosophy carved into a surviving column. Nature does nothing without purpose. In Pergamon's gardens, that wasn't just a mantra, it was medicine. While empires built gardens for gods and kings, the Phoenicians cultivated a different kind of power, one bottled in clay amphorae and traded across the known world. Their vineyards weren't just plots of land, they were economic engines turning sunlight and soil into liquid gold. Stretching along the coastal hills of modern-day Lebanon, these lost wine gardens were so valuable, their secrets were guarded as fiercely as any royal treasury. What set Phoenician vineyards apart wasn't just their wine, it was their science. Surviving texts describe meticulous pruning techniques, with growers training vines onto terraced slopes to maximize sun exposure while minimizing erosion. Some vines were even grafted onto wild rootstock, a trick borrowed from Carthaginian colonies that produced hardier grapes resistant to rot, but the real innovation lay in their fermentation. Unlike the Greeks who diluted their wine with seawater, Phoenician vintners aged theirs in resin-lined jars, creating flavors so distinct their vintages could be identified by scent alone. The proof of their influence is written in shipwrecks. Underwater archaeologists have recovered cargo manifests listing thousands of amphorae, each stamped with symbols denoting vineyard origins, an ancient appellation system. One sunken vessel near Malta still held remnants of a prized vintage, its chemical signature matching soil samples from Tyre's hinterlands. These weren't just trade goods, they were branded commodities, their very labels guaranteeing quality across empires. Yet the most fascinating twist, the Phoenicians' deliberate deception. To protect their monopoly, they spread myths that their best grapes grew only where the blood of their god Adonis stained the earth, a clever ruse to deter competitors from stealing cuttings. Modern DNA testing now reveals the truth. Many of Europe's oldest grape varieties, from Spain's Garnacha to Italy's Zabibbo, trace their roots back to Phoenician stock. In the end, their greatest harvest wasn't wine. It was influence sown vine by vine across the Mediterranean. Amidst the vast Mauryan Empire where philosophy and power intertwined, Emperor Ashoka planted something revolutionary. Gardens meant not for kings but for the people. After the brutal Kalinga War transformed him from conqueror to peacemaker, his stone edicts reveal an extraordinary vision. Scattered across the subcontinent, these proclamations mention shade trees planted along roads, medicinal herbs cultivated near hospitals, and public orchards offering respite to travelers. This wasn't just horticulture, it was governance rooted in compassion. Archaeologists tracing Ashoka's decrees have uncovered remnants of these civic projects. Near modern-day Patna, terracotta pipes suggest sophisticated irrigation feeding groves of mango and neem, trees chosen for their cooling shade and healing properties. A later Greek ambassador's account describes roadside wells topped with lotus ponds, their blooms symbolizing enlightenment to weary passers-by, but the most telling detail. Ashoka explicitly credited these gardens to his subjects, not his own glory, a radical departure from rulers who treated nature as a private trophy. Yet just centuries later, the Kama Sutra painted an entirely different horticultural scene. Its pages whispered of pleasure gardens hidden behind high walls, where lovers met beneath fragrant champak trees and fountains murmured secrets. These weren't spaces for public welfare, but private seduction curved pathways designed for stolen glances, arbors draped in night-blooming jasmine to heighten intimacy. Pollen samples from ancient sites like Ujjain confirm both realities coexisted. The same soil that nourished Ashoka's austere banyans also sustained erotic sculptures nestled in groves of perfumed kadamba. What makes Mauryan gardens so fascinating is this duality, the tension between Buddha's teachings and the earthier joys celebrated in the Kama Sutra. Ashoka's edicts speak of restraint, while Vatsyayana's text revels in sensory abandon. Yet both traditions shared one profound belief, that gardens weren't just landscapes but reflections of the human spirit, whether reaching toward enlightenment or embracing the fleeting beauty of a blossom in the moonlight. In India's ancient soil, both philosophies took root, proving that paradise wears many faces. Beneath the ash of Mount Vesuvius, time didn't just stop, it preserved. While Pompeii's tragic fate is etched in history, few realize the volcano also fossilized something extraordinary, entire gardens frozen mid-bloom. When archaeologists poured plaster into cavities left by decomposed roots, they didn't just uncover plants, they revealed a living hierarchy where every leaf and petal whispered about the people who once tended them. The contrast is striking. In cramped courtyard houses, simple clay pots held thyme and basil for cooking, their modest roots leaving ghostly imprints in the ash. Just a few streets away, the grand villas of Pompeii's elite boasted lavish nymphea, ornate fountain gardens with marble benches arranged around pools lined with shells. The plaster casts here tell a different story, the sprawling root systems of imported myrtle and roses, their delicate tendrils still reaching for a sun that would never rise again. Even the soil betrayed status. Wealthy homes used imported earth mixed with compost, while the poor made do with whatever volcanic soil they could dig. But perhaps the most poignant discovery wasn't the grandest garden, but the most personal. In one modest home, plaster revealed a single fig tree's roots, its trunk carefully shielded by a terracotta pipe to protect it from stray animals. Nearby, the tiny handprints of children pressed into the soil suggested this wasn't just a food source, it was a family's living heirloom. Meanwhile, the infamous House of the Faun flaunted its wealth with a mosaic-lined garden so large, its roots crisscrossed like a botanical labyrinth mirroring the sprawling power of its owner. What makes Pompeii's ghost gardens so haunting isn't just their preservation, it's their honesty. The volcano didn't discriminate between rich and poor, it simply captured the truth. A merchant's rosemary bush was frozen beside his ledger, a noble's prized lemon tree still standing sentinel over a toppled statue of Venus. In these silent, skeletal remains, we see not just tragedy, but life still stubbornly growing, even in the shadow of doom. In the heart of China's golden age, the Tang dynasty cultivated gardens that were more than just landscapes, they were living poetry. Picture a world where scholars didn't just write verses about nature, they strolled through it, their ink brushes pausing as petals drifted onto parchment like whispered inspiration. These weren't mere retreats for emperors, but stages where art, philosophy, and horticulture intertwined in perfect harmony. At the center of this horticultural obsession stood the peony, a flower so revered, its cultivation became a national craze. Wealthy nobles competed to breed the most extravagant blooms, their gardens transformed into living galleries of crimson and pearl-white blossoms. Poets penned odes to their ruffled petals, while merchants traded rare varieties for fortunes. The peony wasn't just a plant, it symbolized prosperity, passion, and the fleeting beauty of life itself, themes that resonated deeply in Tang culture. Yet the dynasty's gardens reached beyond flowers. Artisans sculpted miniature mountains from imported limestone, their jagged peaks mimicking sacred landscapes like Mount Hua. These weren't static decorations, they were immersive experiences. Visitors could wander winding paths that suddenly opened to reveal cascading streams or hidden pavilions, each turn designed to evoke a different poetic mood. Some scholars argue these artificial peaks even functioned as symbolic gateways to the immortal realms Taoist sages sought, but paradise proved fragile. As rebel armies stormed the capital during the Anlushan rebellion, these cultivated wonders burned alongside libraries and temples, palaces collapsed into ornamental ponds, and prized peonies were trampled beneath soldiers' boots. The garden's destruction marked more than just physical loss, it severed a cultural lifeline. Tang poetry mourned their vanishing, comparing the fallen blossoms to dynasties themselves, glorious, ephemeral, and ultimately at the mercy of time. Today, fragments endure in scroll paintings and excavated terraces, their beauty frozen in brushstrokes and stone. What makes these gardens so compelling isn't just their artistry, it's their reminder that even the grandest civilizations bloom, fade, and leave behind seeds for the future to rediscover. In the bone-dried deserts of northern Peru, where rain might not fall for years, the Moch people performed a botanical miracle. They coaxed gardens from the sand. But these were no ordinary plots of maize or beans. Hidden in the intricate designs of their pottery lies evidence of something far more enigmatic. Ritual gardens where plants held power not just to nourish the body but to bend the mind. The Moch left no written records, so their ceramics became their library. Vivid murals on clay vessels depict shamans in elaborate headdresses, surrounded by twisting vines and cactus-like plants with bulbous blooms. At first, archaeologists assumed these were symbolic until they unearthed actual garden beds near ceremonial sites, their soil laced with traces of Anadenanthera seeds and Erythroxylum leaves. These weren't just decorations, they were blueprints, The Moch were cultivating hallucinogens, carefully tending plants that could open doors to the spirit world. What made these gardens extraordinary was their precision. In a landscape where water was scarcer than gold, the Moch engineered canals to divert Andean runoff into sunken plots, creating microclimates humid enough for psychoactive species to thrive. Shamans would harvest these plants, grinding them into potions used in rituals depicted on the pottery itself, ceremonies where rulers communed with deities, their pupils dilated and visions swirling. Some vessels even show garden layouts divided into 4 quadrants, mirroring the Moch's cosmic view of the universe. Yet the most haunting discovery came from the garden's aftermath. Excavations at sites like Huaca de la Luna revealed shrines filled with spent ritual offerings, crushed seed pods, empty snuff tubes, and the skeletons of sacrificed llamas. These weren't just gardens, they were altars where every plant served as a bridge between worlds. Modern chemists analyzing residue on ceremonial cups confirmed their contents, a potent brew of stimulants and vision-inducing compounds still chemically active after 15 centuries. The Moch's legacy lingers in Peru's deserts, where descendants still harvest San Pedro cactus for traditional healing. Their gardens may have vanished, but their message endures. Sometimes the most powerful landscapes aren't those that feed the body, but those that awaken the mind. Amid the golden grasslands of southern Africa, where stone walls rise like the bones of a forgotten giant, lies one of history's most enigmatic mysteries, the lost gardens of Great Zimbabwe. This vast stone city, built between the 11th and 15th centuries, wasn't just a political powerhouse. It was likely home to lush royal gardens, their secrets now whispered only in the ruins. While archaeologists debate their exact form, evidence suggests these weren't just practical plots. They were statements of prestige, fed by ingenious water systems and linked to trade networks stretching as far as China. The clues start with the terraces, carved into the hillsides around the city's granite towers. These level platforms hint at carefully cultivated spaces, possibly royal pleasure gardens or ceremonial groves. Pollen analysis reveals traces of native figs and medicinal plants, species that would have provided shade, fragrance, and perhaps even sacred significance. But the real marvel is how these gardens thrived in a region with unreliable rainfall. Recent excavations uncovered a network of cisterns and channels designed to capture every drop of seasonal runoff. Some scholars believe these systems mirrored those of Swahili city-states like Kilwa, where Persian-influenced engineering turned arid coasts into blooming paradises. Then there's the trade connection. Among the ruins, archaeologists found shards of Ming Dynasty porcelain and shimmers of Arab glass artifacts, proving Great Zimbabwe was a hub in a global exchange of goods and ideas. It's tantalizing to imagine what might have grown here: citrus trees from Oman, spices from India, or even the elusive African golden rhubarb, a plant so prized its leaves were allegedly worth their weight in silver. Could these gardens have been botanical showrooms where kings dazzled foreign merchants with living proof of their wealth and reach? Yet the most poignant detail isn't in the stone or soil, it's in the silence. Unlike Babylon's bragging inscriptions or Rome's meticulous records, Great Zimbabwe's gardeners left no written accounts. Their legacy lies in the way a baobab's roots still grip the terraces, or how the wind rustles through grass where exotic blooms once nodded. These gardens weren't just about control, they were about belonging, a dialogue between stone and sky, ruler and land. And though their shapes have faded, their lesson lingers. Even in the driest earth, greatness can take root. At the windswept edge of Newfoundland, where icy waves crash against the rocky shore, lies a discovery that rewrites everything we thought we knew about Vikings. Erlant's Oaks Meadows, the only confirmed Norse site in North America, isn't just a cluster of sod huts. Hidden beneath the tundra grass, archaeologists uncovered something astonishing: the faint but unmistakable marks of Viking agriculture. This wasn't just a temporary camp, it was an attempt to put down roots literally in a land the sagas called Vinland. The evidence is subtle but revolutionary. Soil samples revealed centuries-old barley pollen, a grain the native Micmac people didn't cultivate. Nearby, charred remnants of butternuts, a tree that grows hundreds of miles south, proved the Norse explored far beyond their coastal camp. But the real bombshell, seeds from a type of wild grape still found in the region, backing up centuries of saga tales about vineyards so plentiful they inspired the name Vinland. What makes these gardens extraordinary isn't their size. They were likely small, struggling plots, but their sheer audacity. Imagine Norse sailors, hardened by Atlantic crossings, carefully tending seedlings in a climate far harsher than their Scandinavian homelands. They built turf-walled enclosures to shield crops from the wind, and may have even transplanted grapevines from farther south, trying to recreate the vineyards of their sagas. It's a side of Vikings we rarely see, not just raiders but reluctant farmers betting on the unproven soil of a new world. Yet the dream was fleeting. Within a decade, the settlement was abandoned, its gardens swallowed by the resilient northern forest. Some blame conflicts with the indigenous Skraelings, others point to the logistical nightmare of sustaining a colony across an ocean. But the legacy lingers in those stubborn barley grains, proof that 1,000 years ago, on the edge of the known world, Vikings dared to imagine a different life. Not with swords, but with seeds. From the hanging terraces of Babylon to the floating chinampas of Xochimilco, these lost gardens reveal something extraordinary, the boundless creativity of our ancestors. Whether shaped by kings or monks, designed for power or healing, each one tells a story of human ambition entwined with nature's rhythms. Some were built to awe, like Assyria's weaponized landscapes. Others, like Epicurus's tranquil grove, offered sanctuary for the mind. And then there were those that blurred the lines between earth and spirit, Olmec ceremonial grounds where every stone held meaning, or Moch hallucinogenic plots where plants became portals. What unites them all isn't just beauty, but purpose. These weren't merely pretty places, they were solutions. The Nabateans turned desert into oasis, the Phoenicians bottled sunlight into wine, and the Mauryans planted shade trees as acts of governance. Even the Vikings, famed for their axes, tried coaxing barley from Newfoundland's stubborn soil. Across continents and eras, gardens became mirrors of the cultures that shaped them, reflecting everything from imperial pride to spiritual yearning. Yet for all we've uncovered, these green sanctuaries still guard mysteries. What rare blooms perfumed Carthage's walled groves before Rome salted the earth? How did Heliopolis's priests use sacred trees to track the stars? And what visions truly unfolded beneath Gandhara's medicinal canopies? If you could step into one of these lost gardens, not as an archaeologist but as a witness, which secrets would you chase? The answer might say as much about you as the garden itself. For now, these forgotten Edens live in fragments, scattered seeds, faded frescoes, and the stubborn roots of trees that outlasted empires. But their legacy grows wherever we still pause to marvel at the audacity of those who dared to shape paradise from soil and stone. If you've ever planted a seed or wandered a garden feeling its history, you've touched that same timeless impulse. And who knows, the next great lost garden might still lie buried, waiting for its story to be told. Until then, the earth keeps its secrets, but the search is half the wonder. Drop your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe for more journeys into history's hidden corners. The past is never really gone, it's just growing quietly beneath our feet.